Millionaire's bride forced his 8-month pregnant maid to clean the wedding floor and her shoes in front of everyone. But what the millionaire did next left the entire hall in shock. "Hi, my beautiful family. May the Almighty bless every woman with radiant health, endless peace, and a love that heals every wound. May He lift the mothers who carry us with sacrifice, strengthen the sisters who stand as our guides, comfort the wives who hold homes together with patience, and protect the daughters who fill our days with light. No woman among us should ever feel small or unseen, for, in God's eyes, she is strength, beauty, and the very soul of life. If your heart is true, right, present, if your love is real, right, I am with Mr. Peter. Some nights are destined to rewrite the entire course of human hearts, and this was one of them." The rain hammered against the towering windows of the Speen Atkinson mansion like nature's own percussion, each droplet carrying secrets that would soon unfold. Linda Gly moved through the marble corridors with practiced silence, her dark hands polishing surfaces that gleamed under crystal chandeliers worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. She had worked here for 3 years, invisible to most, essential to all, navigating the delicate balance between competence and invisibility that domestic staff perfected to survive. The mansion itself was a testament to old money and older power. Portraits of Atkinson ancestors lined the hallways, their painted eyes seeming to judge anyone who dared walk beneath their gaze. Persian rugs that had belonged to kings covered floors of Italian marble. Every surface whispered of wealth accumulated over generations, of influence wielded without conscience, of a world where people like Linda existed only to serve. Craig Atkinson sat in his mahogany-paneled study, brandy untouched, despite being poor an hour earlier, staring at contracts that represented millions of dollars, but meant nothing to his restless soul. At 28, he commanded business empires that spanned continents, but felt empty inside, like a man sleepwalking through a life designed by others. His mother, Susan's constant demands for marriage to suitable society women had worn him thin, each potential bride more calculating than the last. Tonight felt different somehow, charged with an increasing two orders now. Electricity that had nothing to do with the storm raging outside. The study itself reflected Craig's internal conflict. Traditional elements his mother had chosen, heavy furniture, formal paintings, symbols of inherited status mixed uneasily with modern touches. He had added a computer where ledger books, once Saturday, contemporary art, hidden behind classical pieces, evidence of a man trying to honor his heritage while forging his own identity. The library needs attention. Mr. Atkinson, Linda said softly from the doorway, the voice carrying that musical quality he had noticed but never acknowledged, a hint of the Caribbean islands where her grandmother had been born. He looked up, really looked at her for perhaps the first time in 3 years of peripheral awareness. Linda stood there in her simple black uniform, regulation shoes, polished to perfection, her thick hair pulled back in the severe style required by household protocols. But there was something radiant about her that designer gowns could never achieve. Her eyes held depths that spoke of intelligence forcibly hidden, dreams carefully guarded, and a gentle strength that made his heart skip unexpectedly. "Please come in," he said, his voice rougher than intended, betraying emotions he hadn't known he possessed. "You've been working late. The storm delayed my usual schedule," she replied, stepping inside with the careful precision of someone who knew their place in the world's hierarchy. "Mrs. Susan wanted everything perfect for tomorrow's dinner party. The Weatherby family is coming, and she mentioned the library specifically should be spotless." Craig knew the Weatherbys. Old money, older prejudices, the kind of people his mother cultivated for their social influence and political connections. The thought of them inspecting Linda's work, like judges evaluating a servant maid. His jaw tightened unexpectedly. You work too hard, Linda. 16-hour days, no time for yourself. You have a name, dreams, a life beyond these walls. He stood, abandoning his desk, moving closer to this woman who had somehow become the most real thing in his manufactured existence. She looked genuinely surprised that he knew her name, that he had noticed her schedule, that he saw her as more than just efficient hands that cleaned and organized. This job means everything to my family, sir. My mother's medical bills for her cancer treatment, my brother Marcus's college tuition at Howard University, my grandmother's mortgage payments. You're supporting them all alone. Now, Dub, since my father passed 3 years ago. Yes, pride and vulnerability mixed in her voice, the dignity of someone who carried crushing responsibility without complaint. He worked construction, saved every penny he could, but cancer doesn't care about savings accounts. Something fundamental shifted in Craig's chest as he absorbed the weight of her reality. Here was a woman carrying the world on her shoulders without complaint, sacrificing her own youth and dreams to keep her family afloat. While he lived in a golden cage of privilege and emptiness, he moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't name, but recognized as essential. You're remarkable, he said simply, the words carrying more weight than poetry. Linda's breath caught. No one had ever called her remarkable. She was used to being efficient, reliable, invisible, not remarkable. Mr. Atkinson, I should go. Craig, please call me Craig. The request felt like a small rebellion against everything he had been taught about appropriate boundaries. The storm outside seemed to pause as their eyes met properly for the first time. In that moment, walls built by society, race, and class crumbled like paper in rain. He reached out gently, touching her face with fingers that trembled slightly. I've been watching you, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Your kindness to the Resenton, older staff, when you think no one's looking. How you never complain despite working longer hours than anyone else. The way you make this cold house feel warm somehow, like there's actual humanity within these walls. You shouldn't say such things, Linda whispered, but she didn't pull away from his touch. Her skin was soft, warm, alive in a way that made his gilded world feel artificial by comparison. Why? Because of who I am or who you are. Because of who we both are. Because of what happens to people like me who forget their place in houses like this. Craig stepped closer, close enough to smell her simple soap instead of expensive perfumes, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Tonight we're just Craig and Linda, too. People who found something real in a world full of pretense. The lightning illuminated them both as he kissed her, soft and questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Linda's carefully constructed resolve melted like ice in summer rain. She had dreamed of this moment in secret, never believing it could happen, convincing herself it was just fantasy, born from loneliness. This is dangerous, she breathed against his lips, even as her hands found their way to his chest. The most beautiful things usually are. They move together as if in a dream. Two souls, finally finding their missing piece. The storm raged outside while, inside a different kind of tempest, began. Craig lifted her gently, carrying her to the leather couch by the fireplace, where generations of Atkinsons had made decisions that shaped lives and fortunes. Are you certain? He asked, giving her every chance to leave, to return to the safety of prescribed boundaries. I don't want you to regret this. I've never been more certain of anything, Linda replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I've been pretending not to feel this for months. What followed was tender and passionate, a connection that transcended physical desire and touched something spiritual. They talked between kisses, sharing dreams and fears that neither had ever voiced. Craig spoke of feeling trapped in his gilded life, expected to marry for business advantages and produce, heirs to continue a legacy he wasn't sure he believed in. Linda revealed her hopes for her family's future, her secret dream of becoming a nurse, her love of reading medical journals in her spare time. "I want to help," Craig said, afterward stroking her hair as she lay against his chest. "Your mother's treatment, your brother's education, and your grandmother's security. Let me do something meaningful with this inherited wealth." "I don't want your pity or charity," Linda said firmly, her pride intact, even in this moment of vulnerability. "It wouldn't be either. It would be because I care about you. Because you've shown me what real strength looks like." They fell asleep entwined by the dying fire, the storm finally calming outside, as if nature itself was satisfied with the night's work. When dawn broke through the tall windows, reality crept in like unwelcome sunlight. Craig woke, first watching Linda sleep peacefully, her face relaxed and beautiful in the morning light. She looked angelic, and he felt a fierce protectiveness he'd never experienced, as if his entire purpose had suddenly crystallized around keeping this woman safe. Linda stirred, consciousness bringing immediate panic as she remembered where she was, what they had done, how dangerous this moment could be if discovered. "Oh God, what have we done?" "We found each other," Craig said, pulling her close, unwilling and to let the outside world intrude quite yet. "Your mother will destroy me if she finds out. My job, my family's future, everything we depend on." Fear crept into her voice as reality reasserted itself. "I won't let that happen. I promise you. Linda, I will not let anyone hurt you or your family because of this." But as Linda dressed quickly, both knew the world outside wouldn't be so understanding or forgiving. She paused at the door, looking back at him with eyes that held love and terror in equal measure. "Last night was perfect, Craig. The most perfect night of my life. But, in daylight, we're from different worlds that were never meant to collide." Says who? Says everyone who matters. Says history. Says common sense. She slipped away like a ghost, leaving Craig alone, with the scent of her skin still on his clothes and a determination growing in his chest. He wouldn't let society dictate his heart. He wouldn't let prejudice destroy something this real. 2 months later, Linda stared at the pregnancy test with shaking hands, the 2 pink lines changing everything, forever. She sank to her knees in the tiny bathroom, shared with 3 other staff members, tears flowing freely as the implications crashed over her like a tidal wave. Craig had tried to approach her several times since that night, his eyes seeking hers across crowded rooms, his voice gentle when he asked about her welfare. But she'd maintained professional distance, knowing it was safer for both of them, even as her heart broke a little more each day. Now, with his child growing inside her, distance became impossible. She thought of her mother's proud face when she spoke of Linda's good job with the rich family, her brother Marcus's excited phone calls about his pre-med courses, her grandmother's relieved smile when the mortgage payment cleared each month, all of it hanging in the balance of decisions made in passion and consequences discovered in terror. The Atkinsons held their lives in their hands, and Linda knew Susan Atkinson's reputation for cruelty toward anyone who threatened her son's appropriate future. Stories circulated among domestic staff about previous maids who had been dismissed for minor infractions, their references destroyed, their futures ruined. "Miss Linda, you all right in there?" called Maria, another maid, whose wisdom came from 30 years of navigating the treacherous waters of wealthy households. "Fine," Linda managed, though she was anything but fine. That evening, as she cleaned the same library where everything had changed, Craig appeared in the doorway. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure he could hear it, her body responding to his presence even as her mind screamed warnings. We need to talk," he said gently. "Is concern evident? There's nothing to discuss, Mr. Atkinson. Don't do that. Don't pretend that night meant nothing Don't go back to calling me Mr. Atkinson, like we're strangers. Linda turned away, protecting the secret growing inside her like a shield against hope. It was a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment that we both need to forget. Look at me and say that. She couldn't. Instead, she focused on her cleaning, each movement mechanical and desperate, as if perfect housework could somehow restore the order that had been shattered. I've been thinking about you, constantly, Craig continued, his voice carrying an ache that made her chest tight. About us, about what we started that night. I want to explore this, Linda. I want to see where it leads. It leads nowhere good, she whispered, one hand unconsciously moving to her still, flat stomach, where cells were already dividing and growing and creating a future she didn't know how to face. Craig stepped closer, and Linda felt the familiar pull of attraction and something deeper, something that terrified her more than Susan's potential threats ever could. The pull of love, real and consuming, and completely impossible. How could she tell him about the baby when doing so might destroy everything they both held dear? Chapter 2. The Mother's Ultimatum. Power, when wielded without mercy, becomes the sharpest blade that cuts deepest into the innocent heart. Susan Atkinson stood at her bedroom window like a predator surveying her territory, her steel-gray eyes missing nothing in the empire she had built through decades of calculated moves and ruthless decisions. At 55, she was still striking, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed by stylists who flew in from New York, her Chanel suit immaculate despite the early morning hour, her posture radiating the confidence of someone who had crushed empires and destroyed lives with less effort than it took to sip her morning tea. The view from her window encompassed not just manicured gardens worth more than most houses, but a graciously, carefully constructed world of influence and control. Every gardener, every security guard, every staff member represented a thread in the web of power she had woven around her family's interests. She knew their names, their quellant weaknesses, their dependencies. Knowledge was power, and Susan Atkinson had made herself the most knowledgeable woman in her sphere of influence. This morning, however, something felt different in her domain. A disturbance in the carefully maintained order she had spent decades perfecting. She had noticed the changes in her son Craig over the past weeks, the distracted looks during family dinners, the sudden interest in household staff welfare that had never concerned him before, the way he lingered in certain rooms as if hoping to encounter someone. Susan had survived in high society by reading people like open books, analyzing their motivations and desires until she could predict their actions with scientific precision. Craig was displaying all the signs of a man smitten, and that represented a threat to everything she had planned. The Atkinson legacy wasn't built on romantic whims. It was constructed through strategic marriages, calculated alliances, and the ruthless elimination of anything that threatened the family's ascension through American aristocracy. Susan's own marriage to Craig's father had been such an arrangement, successful, profitable, and devoid of the messy emotions that destroyed so many wealthy families. Mrs. Susan, her personal secretary, knocked softly on the mahogany door. Patricia had worked for Susan for 15 years, long enough to recognize the dangerous stillness that preceded her employer's most devastating moves. "Bring them in, Patricia." Susan flipped through the files with practiced efficiency until one name caught her attention like a spider, sensing movement in her web. Linda Gly, recent doctor's visit, blood work, ordered. The medical terminology was clear to someone who had spent years managing delicate situations that could threaten family reputations. Pregnancy, test positive estimated, conception date that aligned perfectly with her growing suspicions about Craig's behavior. Susan's perfectly manicured fingers tightened on the paper. Her knuckles, going white as rage, flowed through her veins like ice water. She had suspected something when she noticed Craig's sudden interest in the household staff's daily working conditions, his questions about their families, his uncharacteristic concern for people he had previously ignored. But this confirmation sent cold fury through her entire being. That little maid had been in her house for 3 years, invisible and harmless, content with her place in the world's natural hierarchy until she had somehow managed to catch the bright attention of the heir to one of America's greatest fortunes. Patricia, bring Linda Gly to my study immediately. Cancel my 11 appointment. This may take some time. Yes, Mrs. Susan. Shall I mention the reason for the meeting? Tell her it's regarding her employment review. Nothing more. 20 minutes later, Linda stood before the imposing mahogany desk, her hands clasped tightly to hide their trembling. She had never been summoned to Susan's private study, a room designed to intimidate with its dark wood paneling, leather-bound legal books, and portraits of Atkinson ancestors who seemed to glare down with disapproval. The opulent space felt like a tribunal chamber where verdicts were delivered and fates decided. Sit, Susan commanded, not looking up from the papers spread before her like evidence in a trial. Linda perched on the edge of the leather chair, every instinct screaming danger. Susan Atkinson's reputation for ruthlessness was legendary among the household staff. Stories circulated about previous employees who had crossed her, their careers destroyed with surgical precision, their references poisoned, with subtle implications that made future employment impossible. You've been with us 3 years, Susan said, finally, her voice deceptively calm like the eye of a hurricane. Hardworking, reliable, invisible. I valued those qualities in my domestic staff. Thank you, Mrs. Susan. Until now, Susan's eyes snapped up cold as Arctic ice, studying Linda with the intensity of a scientist, examining a particularly dangerous specimen. Tell me about your recent medical appointment. Linda's blood turned to ice as she realized the trap she had walked into. I'm not sure what you mean. Don't insult my intelligence, girl. I monitor the health insurance claims of everyone in my employee. You're pregnant. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Linda's carefully constructed facade crumbled, and she fought back tears that threatened to spill, knowing that any display of emotion would only feed Susan's predatory instincts. I can explain. No need for explanations. I know exactly what happened. My son has always had a weakness for charity cases, stray animals, lost causes. But this, Susan stood, moving around the desk like a circling shark, her heels clicking on polished wood with military precision. This ends now. Mrs. Susan, please, please, what? Please don't protect my family's interests. Please ignore the fact that some ambitious little maid has seduced my son in hopes of securing her financial future. Linda's mouth opened, but no words came. How could she defend herself against accusations that painted love as calculation, passion as manipulation? Whose child is it? Linda's mouth opened, but no words came. How could she lie about something so sacred, so beautiful? But how could she tell the truth when it would destroy everyone she loved? I'm waiting for an answer. It's not Mr. Craig's, Linda whispered, the lie burning her throat like acid. Each word, a betrayal of the love that had created the child growing within her. Susan smiled, a cold expression that never reached her eyes. The smile of a predator that had cornered its prey. Of course it isn't, because you're going to ensure it stays that way. I don't understand. Susan returned to her chair, pressing a button on her desk. A large screen descended from the ceiling like a judgment from above, displaying photographs that made Linda's heart stop completely. Her mother in the hospital bed, fragile and connected to machines that beeped with electronic precision, monitoring a life that hung in the balance of expensive treatments. Her brother Marcus at college, unaware of the forces aligning against him, his bright smile frozen in a photograph taken during parents' weekend. Her grandmother's small house, where 3 generations lived together, the mortgage papers visible on the kitchen table, where family meetings were held to discuss finances. Beautiful family, Susan said, conversationally, her voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone discussing the weather, so dependent on the income you provide. Your mother's experimental treatment costs $30,000 monthly. Cutting-edge therapy that her basic insurance doesn't cover. Your brother's scholarship covers tuition, but not living expenses, books, or the research opportunities that will make him competitive for medical school. Your grandmother's mortgage has 6 months before foreclosure proceedings begin. Linda's hands shook violently as the full scope of her vulnerability was laid out like pieces on a chessboard. Please, don't hurt them. I have no intention of hurting anyone. Violence is so messy, so unnecessary when more elegant solutions exist, as long as you follow simple instructions. The photographs changed, showing Craig's business partners, social connections, political allies, a web of power and influence that stretched across continents, representing billions of dollars in combined assets and the ability to shape policy, control markets, and destroy. Lives with casual efficiency. My son will inherit the largest private fortune in the state when he reaches 30, just 2 years from now. His future wife will be chosen from our social circle, selected for her ability to enhance our family's position and produce heirs who will continue our legacy. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Yes, Linda whispered, her voice barely audible. If you claim this child is Craig's, I will destroy your family so thoroughly that recovery will be impossible. Your mother will lose her treatment. I'll personally ensure that her insurance claim is denied, and no other facility will accept her case. Your brother will be expelled on fabricated charges of academic dishonesty that will follow him for life. Your grandmother will lose her and home, and every member of your family will be blacklisted from employment in this city. Tears flowed freely now, but Linda remained silent, paralyzed by the scope of the threats and the casual way they were delivered. However, Susan continued, her voice softening, deceptively like poison disguised as medicine. If you continue as you have been, denying any connection between this pregnancy and my son, your family, security is guaranteed. Your mother's treatment continues indefinitely. Your brother graduates with honors and receives recommendations for the best medical schools. Your grandmother keeps in her home and receives a comfortable pension to supplement her social security. What if Craig asks directly? Susan's smile turned predatory, her eyes glittering with malicious satisfaction. Then you lie. Convincingly, you tell him the father is some boyfriend who abandoned you. Create a believable story about a relationship that ended badly. You beg for his understanding as your employer, nothing more. He'll want to help financially, which you will refuse with dignity and pride. You are independent, taking responsibility for your mistakes, determined to handle this situation without charity. He will respect that and move on to more appropriate romantic interests. Linda felt trapped in a nightmare where every choice led to destruction. The child growing inside her was created from love, from the most beautiful night of her life. But that love could destroy everyone she held. Dear, I need time to think. You have no time. Craig has been asking questions about your welfare, showing concern that goes beyond appropriate employer interest. This ends today, or the consequences begin immediately. Susan pressed another button. The screen showed real-time footage from security cameras, Linda's mother's hospital room, where she slept peacefully, the brother's dorm, where he studied late into the night, her grandmother's kitchen, where she prepared dinner for the neighbors she helped support. The message was unmistakable and terrifying. Choose carefully, Linda. Your family's Future depends on your next words. Lives literally hang in the balance of your decision. Linda closed her eyes, thinking of Craig's gentle touch, his whispered promises, the way he had looked at her like she was precious and valuable instead of invisible and disposable. Then she thought of her mother's labored breathing during the bad days, her brother's dreams of becoming a doctor like their father had wanted to be, her grandmother's tearful pride when Linda got this prestigious job. "I understand," she said finally, each word a nail in the coffin of her happiness. "The baby isn't Mr. Craig's, and if he asks directly, I'll lie." Susan nodded approvingly, her satisfaction evident in the way she relaxed back into her chair. "Smart girl, practical. Your father would be proud of the sacrifice you're making for your family's welfare." Linda stood on unsteady legs each step toward the door, feeling like a betrayal of everything beautiful that had happened between her and Craig. "Linda," Susan called softly as she reached for the door handle, "remember that love is a luxury only some people who can afford. You are not one of them. Accept that reality and everyone you care about will be safe." That evening, Linda sat in her tiny Azantesi, room, one hand on her growing belly, the other clutching her phone. Greg had sent 3 messages asking to meet, each one more concerned than the last. She typed and deleted responses, each word feeling like another betrayal of the connection they had shared. Finally, she typed, "Mr. Atkinson, please understand that what happened between us was inappropriate and unprofessional. I take full responsibility and ask that we maintain professional boundaries going forward. I hope you can respect this request." She hit send before she could change her mind, then buried her face in her pillow to muffle her sobs, knowing she had just destroyed the only real love she had ever experienced. Downstairs in his study, Craig stared at the message, confusion and hurt wearing in his chest. Something was wrong, fundamentally terribly wrong. The Linda, who had melted in his arms, who had trusted him with her body and soul, wouldn't write such cold, formal words. But what could have changed between then and now? Chapter 3. The arranged engagement. Sometimes the cruelest prisons are built from golden expectations and lined with silk-covered chains. The Atkinson family's private dining room gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Susan arranged the perfect trap disguised as an elegant dinner party. She had orchestrated this evening with military precision, each guest chosen for maximum impact, every conversation topic calculated to serve her ultimate goal. Craig adjusted his tie, unaware he was walking into his mother's carefully constructed snare. For weeks, Linda's rejection had gnawed at him like an open wound. Her sudden coldness made no sense, but every attempt to speak with her privately had been met with professional politeness that felt like walls of ice. "You look handsome tonight, darling," Susan said, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from his jacket. "Marion will be so pleased." Marion is greater than Craig frowned. Is greater than Marion Chef is coming. Of course, the Chefs are our oldest family friends. Besides, you two were so close in college. Craig remembered Marion differently. Beautiful, certainly, with her platinum blonde hair and designer everything, but also cold, entitled, and possessed of a cruel streak she hid behind social graces. Their college relationship had ended when he realized she cared more about his bank account than his heart. "Mother, I thought this was just a family dinner." Susan's smile was perfectly practiced. "Family can mean many things, Craig. The Chefs have been like family for generations. It's time you started thinking seriously about your future, about continuing our legacy." Before Craig could respond, the doorbell announced the first guests. Within an insane hour, the dining room filled with the cream of society. Their conversation a symphony of privilege and expectation. Marion Schiffer entered like a queen, claiming her throne. Her white Valentino dress hugged every curve. Her diamond necklace caught the light with each breath, and her smile promised everything while revealing nothing. She moved through the crowd, accepting compliments like a woman accustomed to worship. "Craig," she purred, extending her hand for him to kiss. "You look absolutely divine. Success suits you, Marion." "You look the same," she laughed, the sound like wind chimes in winter. "Still the charmer. I've missed your honesty." Throughout dinner, Susan maneuvered conversations like a master chess player. Every topic somehow circled back to Craig and Marion's compatibility, their shared backgrounds, similar social circles, complementary business interests. "Remember when you two won the yacht club regatta?" Susan asked pointedly. "Such natural partners?" Marion placed her hand over Craig's, her touch perfectly calculated. "We always did work well together. Great. Minds think alike." Craig's attention drifted to the dining room's entrance, where Linda appeared briefly to supervise the serving staff. Their eyes met for one heart-topping moment before. She quickly looked away, but not before. He saw something that made his breath catch. Was she showing? The black uniform was loose, fitting, but there was something different about her. Silhouette, a protective hand briefly touched her stomach before she realized he was watching. "Craig, are you listening?" Marion's voice cut through his thoughts. "Sorry, distracted by work." Marion's eyes followed his gaze to the doorway where Linda had stood. For just an instant, her perfect mask slipped, revealing something calculating and cold. "Your staff seems devoted," Marion said carefully. "They're good people. Of course, though I imagine some boundaries need maintaining. When I marry, I'll certainly make changes to ensure appropriate household management." The assumption in her words made Craig bristle. "When you marry," Susan leaned forward eagerly. "That's actually why we're here tonight, darling. The Sheffies and I have been discussing the future." Craig's fork paused halfway to his door. Mouth. "What future?" Marion's father, Harrison Sheffy, cleared his throat. "Importantly, our families have been aligned for generations, Craig. It's time to make that alliance permanent. Marion has agreed to be your wife." The words hit Craig like physical blows. Around the table, faces turned toward him expectantly, as if his entire future had been decided without his input. "I don't recall proposing," Craig said, slowly. Susan's laugh was light, but her eyes were steel. "Don't be dramatic, darling. This is how our world works. Strategic marriages built on mutual respect and shared values. Love grows from compatibility, and if I refuse..." The temperature in the room dropped perceptibly. Susan's smile never wavered, but her voice carried subtle menace. "Why would you refuse? Marion is perfect for you, beautiful, educated, from the right family. Any reasonable man would be grateful for such an arrangement." Craig looked around the table at faces that suddenly seemed like strangers. These people he had known his entire life were treating his life like a business transaction. "I need to think about this." Harrison Sheff's voice carried the weight of old money and older power. "Think about what is greater than is greater than. This benefits everyone involved. Our business interests, our social position, our family legacies. Marion will be an excellent wife and mother to your children." The word children sent a lance through Craig's heart. Somewhere in this house, Linda was carrying what might be his child, and these people were planning his future as if she didn't exist. "The wedding should be in 6 months, Marion said confidently. "Spring is so romantic, and it gives me time to plan something spectacular. You're all assuming I'll agree." Susan's mask finally slipped slightly. Don't be foolish. This family has responsibilities, expectations. We don't have the luxury of marrying for silly, romantic notions like love. Love is of all luxury we can't afford. This marriage secures our future and honors our obligations. Craig pushed back from the table. I need air. He walked to the kitchen, knowing he would find Linda there. She stood at the sink, her back to him, shoulders tense with the weight of secrets. Linda. She turned and he saw tears. She quickly tried to hide. Mr. Atkinson, is there something you need? The truth. Something's wrong. Something changed after that night, and I need to know what. Linda's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, then away. Nothing changed. That night was a mistake we both need to forget. Look me in the eyes and tell me you felt nothing. She couldn't. Instead, she focused on the dishes, her movements, mechanical and desperate. Are you pregnant? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Linda's hands stilled on the plate she was washing. That's not your concern. If you're carrying my child, it's very much my concern. I'm not carrying your child. The lie came out, flat, rehearsed. Greg stepped closer, studying her face. Linda, if someone threatened you, if someone made you afraid, no one threatened me. I made a mistake with someone, and now I'm dealing with the consequences. It has nothing to do with you. From the dining room, Marion's laughter carried like breaking glass. Linda flinched at the sound. They want me to marry her, Craig said, quietly. Then you should. She's perfect. For you. Same world, same everything. What if I don't want perfect? What if I want real? Linda's composure finally cracked. Real doesn't pay for medical bills or keep families safe. Perfect does. Marry her, Craig. Forget about one stupid night with the help. She pushed past him, leaving Craig alone with the echo of words that sounded nothing like the woman who had trusted him with her body and soul. In the dining room, Marion watched through the doorway, her smile sharp as diamonds. Soon, she would be Craig's wife, and her first act would be ensuring that presumptuous little Maid learned her proper place. Chapter 4. Wedding Preparations and Hidden Pain. Hell, Linda discovered, was not a place of fire and brimstone, but a mansion filled with wedding plans where your heart broke anew with every passing hour. The Atkinson estate had transformed into a whirlwind of activity over the past 2 months. Wedding planners moved through rooms like generals commanding armies, their assistants trailing behind, with fabric samples, flower arrangements, and seating charts. Linda watched it all from the shadows, her growing belly hidden beneath increasingly loose uniforms, her heart fracturing with each new detail. Marion had moved into the mansion immediately after the engagement announcement, claiming she needed to establish her presence and prepare for her role as the lady of the house. What she really did was rain terror over the household, staff with the cruelty of someone drunk on newfound power. Linda Marion's voice cut through the morning air like a whip. Crack. These roses are completely wrong. I specifically said blush pink, not salmon. Fix it immediately. Linda looked at the arrangements that had taken the Flores team 3 hours to create. They were beautiful, perfect, blush pink, exactly as requested. But Marion's game wasn't about flowers. Yes, Miss Marion, Linda replied quietly. That's Mrs. Atkinson to be to you. Linda bit back her response. At 5 months, pregnant, her emotions ran closer to the surface, but she couldn't afford to show them. Not with Susan's threats hanging over her family like storm clouds. Marion stepped closer, her low-boot heels clicking on marble. You know, Linda, I've been thinking about household changes after the wedding, efficiency, improvements, staff reductions. The threat was clear. Linda's job, her family's lifeline balanced on Marion's whims. I understand, Miss Marion. Good. Now fix those flowers before I lose my patience entirely. As Marion glided away, Linda felt the baby kick, as if responding to the stress in her mother's 19 voice. She placed a protective hand on her belly, whispering softly, It's okay, little one. Mama will keep you safe. Talking to yourself now. Linda spun to find Craig in the doorway, his face unreadable. He had grown thinner over the past months, his eyes holding a haunted quality that made her heart ache. "Mr. Atkinson, I was just adjusting the floral arrangements. They look perfect to me. Miss Marion has specific preferences." Craig moved closer, and Linda fought the urge to step back. Being near him was agony and ecstasy combined, her body still responding to his presence, despite everything that had happened. "You're showing now," he said, quietly. Linda's arms instinctively wrapped around her middle. At 5 months, hiding her pregnancy was becoming impossible, despite loose clothing and careful positioning. "It's not your concern. Everything about you is my concern." The tenderness in his voice nearly broke her resolve. "Don't say things like that." "Why?" "Because you're about to become a married man. Because this marriage is a sham, and we both know it." Linda looked around nervously. "Someone might hear. Let them. I never asked for this engagement. Mother and the chefs arranged it like a business merger. Then why are you going through with it?" Craig's laugh was bitter. "Because apparently I have responsibilities, family obligations, a legacy to maintain." He paused, studying in her face. "The same reasons you won't tell me who the father of your baby is." Linda's heart hammered. "There's nothing to tell. I don't believe you. Your belief isn't required." They stood in charged silence, two people drowning in secrets and longing. Craig reached toward her face, then stopped, his hand falling to his side. "I dream about on you," he said quietly. "Every night, that night in the library, how you felt in my arms, the way you looked at me, like I mattered." "Craig, please, do you dream about me?" The question hung between them like a bridge. Neither dared cross. Linda's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't shed. Dreams don't pay for medical treatments or college tuition or mortgages. "So you admit you dream about me?" Before Linda could respond, Marion's voice echoed through the hallway. "Craig, darling, where did you disappear to?" "The caterer needs final menu approval." Craig's jaw tightened. "We're not finished talking." "Yes, we are," Linda whispered, turning back to the flowers. Marion appeared in the doorway like a vision in white silk, her smile bright and possessive. "There you are." And Linda, still fussing with those flowers. "They're just arrangements, not the crown. Jewels. They need to be perfect for your special day," Linda replied, diplomatically. Marion's smile turned sharp. "Everything needs to be perfect. Greg and I have such high standards." She slipped her arm through Craig's possessively. "Don't we, darling?" Craig looked at Linda one last time before allowing Marion to pull him away. "Yes, perfect." That evening, Linda sat in her small room, one hand on her growing belly, the other holding a letter from her brother, Marcus. He was thriving at college, his grades excellent, his future bright. Her mother's latest test results showed the experimental treatment was working. Her grandmother had sent a photo of her garden in full bloom. Everything Susan had promised was coming true. Her family was safe, healthy, progressing. All it cost was Linda's heart and the truth about her child's paternity. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Maria, the senior housekeeper, entered with a cup of tea. "You look tired, Mika. Just wedding stress." Maria sat beside her on the narrow bed. At 60, she had worked for the Atkinsons for 30 years and seen everything. Her dark eyes were kind but knowing. "I've watched you these past months," Maria said gently. "Watched how you protect your belly when you think no one's looking. Watched how your eyes follow Mr. Craig. Watched how his eyes follow you." Linda's breath caught. "Maria, I've also watched Mrs. Susan, seen her cruelty to girls who dare dream above their station. 20 years ago, there was another maid, young, beautiful, pregnant. She claimed Mr. Craig's father was the father. Linda's heart stopped. What happened? She disappeared one night. Her family moved across the country suddenly. Word was they came into money, but the girl was never seen again. The message was clear. Linda wasn't the first to face Susan's ultimatums, and she wouldn't be the last. Some prisons have golden bars, Maria continued, but they're still prisons. After Maria left, Linda stood before her tiny mirror, studying her reflection. Her body was changing, growing round, with Craig's child, but her spirit felt hollow. In 3 days, she would watch the man she loved marry another woman, and she would keep her silence to protect everyone she held dear. She pressed both hands to her belly, feeling the baby's movement. "Your daddy loves us," she whispered, "but sometimes love isn't enough to overcome the walls society builds. Forgive me for the life choice I'm making." Outside her window, the mansion glowed with preparation, lights, staff working through the night for a wedding that would destroy the Assery, only real love she had ever known. In just 72 hours, Craig Atkinson would belong to Marion Sheffy forever, unless something miraculous happened to change everything. Chapter 5. The Wedding Day. Humiliation. Some moments are designed by fate to reveal the true character of human souls, stripping away pretense, until only truth remains naked and nighty, terrible in its absolute clarity. The morning of Craig's wedding dawned with crystalline perfection, as if nature herself conspired to mock Linda's breaking heart with beauty that felt like cruelty. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows that had witnessed generations of Atkinson celebrations, casting rainbow patterns across marble floors that would soon host society's most anticipated event. The irony wasn't lost on Linda. The most perfect day of the year for the most imperfect union she had ever witnessed. Linda moved through her duties like a ghost haunting her own life, each step a reminder of dreams that could never be. At 7 months pregnant, her condition was becoming impossible to hide, despite the loose, black uniform and careful positioning that had become second nature. The baby had grown active lately, responding to her stress with kicks and movements that sometimes took her breath away, as if he too understood that today would change everything forever. Every corner of the mansion held memories of Craig, the library where they had first made love, the kitchen where he had questioned her about the pregnancy, the hallways where their eyes had met in secret understanding. Today, all of those spaces would be filled with guests celebrating his marriage to another woman, transforming their private sanctuary into a public theater of her heartbreak. The grand ballroom had been transformed into something that belonged in fairy tales, a cathedral of white roses and crystal that represented more money than most people saw in lifetimes. 219. Society's most influential guests would witness Craig Atkinson pledge his life to Marion Sheffy, sealing a union built on business interests and family expectations rather than the love that now seemed like a forbidden luxury. Florists had worked through the night, creating arrangements so elaborate they looked like living architecture. Each centerpiece contained rare orchids flown in from Thailand, roses cultivated in private greenhouses, and baby's breath that had been specially treated to maintain perfect color. The crystal chandeliers had been polished until they blazed like captured stars, their light reflecting off silver and gold place settings that had served royalty. "Linda, hurry with those champagne glasses," barked Mrs. Peterson, the head housekeeper, whose normally kind demeanor had been replaced by the stress of managing the most important social event the mansion had hosted in decades. "The guests will arrive in 2 hours, and every detail must be beyond reproach." Linda lifted the heavy tray carefully, her back aching from the added weight she carried. The baby had been particularly active this morning, as if sensing its mother's distress through the biochemical connections that linked their bodies. She whispered soft reassurances in the PWA. Her grandmother had taught her ancient words of comfort that had soothed generations of women facing impossible circumstances. The champagne glasses she arranged were baccarat crystal, each one worth more than she earned in a week. Their surfaces so clear they seemed to hold liquid light. Everything about this wedding spoke of excess, designed to impress, luxury meant to overwhelm, display calculated to establish dominance through sheer financial force. Marion appeared in the doorway like an ice queen surveying her domain, wearing a white silk robe that cost more than most cars, her blonde hair already styled by a team of experts who had flown in from Los Angeles specifically for this day. Even in preparation, she looked like a woman born to wear diamonds and receive worship. Her beauty, the kind that required armies of professionals to maintain, but appeared effortless to observers. "The flowers in the bridal suite are completely wrong," Marion announced to no one in particular, her voice carrying the authority of someone whose displeasure could ruin careers. "They're supposed to be white orchids imported from specific green H houses in Colombia, not the white roses that some incompetent florist substituted." Who was responsible for this disaster? Linda set down her tray with careful precision. "I can coordinate the correction immediately, Miss Marion. Mrs. Atkinson, as of today." Marion's smile was sharp as winter, cutting through any pretense of kindness. "And yes, you will fix it, among other things that need correcting, around here, once I'm fully established as mistress of this house." She glided closer, her presence radiating the confidence of a woman who had never been denied anything she wanted, whose every whim had been catered to since birth. Linda noticed how Marion's eyes lingered on her rounded belly with calculating interest, as if memorizing details for some future purpose. "You know, Linda, I've been thinking extensively about our conversation regarding staff efficiency and household management. They believed today is the perfect time to demonstrate new standards and expectations for everyone's benefit." Before Linda could respond, Marion deliberately knocked over a crystal champagne flute with a Parfleys weltervent, casual gesture that appeared accidental but was clearly intentional. The glass shattered against the marble floor, sending shards scattered across a wide area in a pattern that would be impossible to clean quickly. The sound rang through the ballroom like a gunshot, drawing attention from every staff member within hearing. "Oh my," Marion said with mock concern, a voice carrying just enough volume to ensure nearby workers heard every word. "How terribly clumsy of me. These accidents do happen when one is excited about such an important day." She turned to Linda with eyes that glittered like the broken glass, coldness masquerading as authority. "Clean this up immediately, Linda, and be thorough. I don't want any of our distinguished guests injured by missed pieces when they arrive for the reception." Linda looked at the scattered shards, then at Marion's expectant face. The request was reasonable on its surface, but loaded with malicious intent that only Linda could fully understand. "Of course, I'll get the proper cleaning equipment and have this cleared safely within minutes." "No," Marion's voice cut, like ice, sharp and commanding. "On your hands and knees, every piece must be picked up by hand to ensure nothing is missed. Brooms and dustpans might push small fragments into corners where they could cause injury later." The demand hung in the air like poison. It's true. Nature immediately clear to everyone within earshot. Around them, other staff members had stopped their preparations to watch, their faces reflecting shock at the casual cruelty being displayed. This wasn't about safety or thoroughness. This was about power, about humiliation, about establishing dominance through degradation. "Miss Marion, in my condition, getting on the floor would be extremely difficult and potentially unsafe." "Difficult? Yes, I imagine it would be." Marion's smile never wavered, but her eyes grew colder with each word. "But that's what happens when people make poor choices and find themselves in figs." compromising positions. Surely the welfare of our guests is more important than your temporary discomfort. Linda felt the baby kick frantically, as if responding to her elevated stress and the injustice of the situation. Her hands instinctively moved to protect her belly, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Marion or the growing audience of wedding guests who had arrived early, drawn by curiosity about the commotion they could hear from the entrance hall. I can clean it properly and thoroughly with appropriate tools. In less time. I gave you a direct order, Linda. Marion's voice turned arctic, carrying the weight of generations of privilege and entitlement. Unless you're refusing to do your job, because that would be grounds for immediate dismissal, wouldn't it? And dismissal would affect not just you, but your family's security as well. The threat was crystal clear, delivered with surgical precision. Linda's job, her family security, everything Susan had promised in exchange for her silence, all balanced precariously on this moment of calculated cruelty designed to break her spirit publicly. Linda looked around the ballroom, now filling with early arriving guests who seemed fascinated by the drama unfolding before them. Society photographers adjusted their cameras instinctively, recognizing a moment that would define the day. Everything was being witnessed, recorded, made permanent by people who would remember this humiliation long after the wedding itself was forgotten, with movements that spoke of dignity, maintained despite impossible circumstances. Linda sank to her knees, carefully, her pregnant belly making the position awkward and painful. The marble floor was cold and unforgiving against her knees, each surface perfectly polished and harder than stone. She began picking up glass shards with hands that shook despite her efforts to maintain composure, each piece cutting into her pride as surely as if it cut of her skin more thoroughly. Marion commanded from above, her satisfaction barely concealed behind a mask of concerned supervision. I can see pieces. You've missed near the wall. We can't have wedding guests stepping on glass fragments. Linda bent forward, her advanced pregnancy making the position nearly impossible without causing pain that shot through her back like lightning. Tears she couldn't suppress began falling, splashing onto the marble and mixing with glass fragments in a pattern that seemed to symbolize everything broken in her world. Her back screamed in protest, but she continued, driven by desperation and the knowledge that her family's future depended on her complete submission to this humiliation. Around the ballroom, guests whispered among themselves with the excited energy of people witnessing drama that would fuel gossip for months. Some looked genuinely uncomfortable at the spectacle. Others seemed fascinated by the display of power and degradation. Marion stood like a queen observing a peasant's punishment, her satisfaction growing more obvious with each moment of Linda's suffering. Lower, Marion instructed with authority that brooked no argument. You're not getting the smaller pieces near the floor molding. Attention to detail is what separates professional service from amateur effort. Linda's breath came in ragged gasps as she struggled to comply, her body protesting every movement, while her spirit crumbled under the weight of public humiliation. The baby kicked frantically inside her, as if trying to help its mother escape this nightmare that seemed designed to break her completely. Her uniform stretched tight across her belly, making her condition obvious to everyone watching and adding another layer of vulnerability to her degradation. Please, Linda whispered, her voice breaking as she reached the limits of physical endurance. I can't maintain this position much longer. Can't what? Can't do your job properly? Can't follow simple instructions designed to ensure our guests' safety? Marion's voice carried throughout the ballroom, ensuring everyone heard the implications. Perhaps this position isn't suitable for someone in your condition. Perhaps we need to reconsider whether you're capable of meeting our standards. The words dripped with disdain and threat, making Linda's situation crystal clear to every witness. Comply completely with this degradation or lose everything her family depended on for survival. She lowered herself further, her forehead nearly touching the floor, her pregnant belly pressed against marble that felt like ice, glass pieces pressed into her palms as tears flowed freely. But she continued collecting fragments, all she had already gathered, playing Marion's game of humiliation because she had no choice left. "That's much better," Marion said with satisfaction that was becoming harder to disguise. "You missed one by your left hand, the small piece near your knee." Linda reached for the shard with movements clumsy from exhaustion and despair, her dignity stripped away piece by piece along with each fragment of glass around her. The whispers grew louder as guests recognized they were witnessing something that crossed lines of basic human decency. Absolutely appalling treatment. That poor girl in her condition, 7 months, a long, at least inhumane way to treat anyone. Someone should intervene. But Marion seemed to feed on the attention, her cruelty growing bolder with each moment of Linda's degradation, as if the creasing the porous, as if the audience's discomfort proved her power rather than her heartlessness. "I think you missed several pieces," Marion announced loudly enough for every guest to hear clearly. "Start over from the beginning more carefully this time with proper attention to thoroughness." Linda's heart shattered completely as it realized the torture would continue indefinitely. She couldn't endure this again, but she couldn't afford to refuse. Her mother's treatment, her brother's education, her grandmother's home, all hung in the balance of this moment, designed to destroy her spirit completely. She began again, picking up pieces she had already collected multiple times, playing Marion's game of endless humiliation because she had no power to stop it. Her tears created small pools on the marble that reflected the crystal chandeliers above, and her back felt like it might snap from the strain of maintaining positions designed to cause maximum discomfort. "Fascinating display," Marion mused loudly, enough for nearby guests to hear every word. "I wonder what kind of man abandons a woman in such a condition? What kind of poor judgment leads to these situations of dependency and desperation?" Linda's hands stilled on a glass shard as the implication hit her like a physical blow. Marion was creating a public narrative about Linda's pregnancy, painting her as abandoned and irresponsible, a cautionary tale about the consequences of moral failure. "But I suppose," Marion continued with cruel satisfaction, "some people simply lack the moral foundation to make better choices, breeding without marriage, expecting others to support their mistakes and poor decisions." The words cut deeper than any glass could, striking at Linda's deepest insecurities and fears. She felt her spirit breaking, along with her body, her dreams of dignity crumbling into nothing under the weight of public judgment and private cruelty. She reached for another piece, with mechanical precision, her movements now driven by survival instinct rather than hope. Around her, the wedding preparations continued, as if her humiliation was merely part of the stage decor, a spectacle designed to entertain guests before the real ceremony began. Just as Linda felt she might collapse entirely from exhaustion and despair, a shadow fell across the marble in front of her, blocking the light from the chandeliers above. "What the hell is going on here?" Craig's voice cut through the ballroom like thunder, and Linda's heart stopped beating entirely. Chapter 6. Craig's Stand. There are moments when a man's entire character is tested in the space of a single heartbeat. When the choice between cowardice and courage defines not just his future, but his very soul, and the legacy he will leave behind. Craig Atkinson stood in the ballroom doorway, wearing his perfectly tailored wedding tuxedo. Every detail of his appearance crafted for this day by the most expensive stylists money could buy. His hair was immaculately styled, his shoes polished to mirror perfection, his cufflinks bearing the family crest that had been passed down through generations, but his face bore an expression of horror and fury that transformed him from society groom into something far more dangerous, a man who had finally seen the true cost of the world he had inherited. The scene before in him was like something from a nightmare, painted in crystal and marble. Linda remained frozen on her hands and knees, glass shards scattered around her, pregnant form like fallen stars, tears streaming down her face as she looked up at the man she loved with eyes full of shame and desperation that cut through him like a blade. Her condition was unmistakable now, 6 months pregnant, and Esther forced into a position of degradation that would have been cruel for anyone, but was unconscionable for a woman carrying a child. Around the ballroom, wedding guests stood in clusters, their champagne glasses forgotten as they witnessed what should have been impossible in civilized society. Some looked genuinely horrified, others seemed morbidly fascinated, but all were transfixed by the spectacle of a generous, pregnant woman being systematically humiliated for the entertainment of those who considered themselves her betters. "I asked you a question." Craig's voice was deadly quiet as he stepped into the ballroom, his eyes fixed on Marion with an intensity that made several guests step back instinctively. What is going on here? Marion's mask of cruel satisfaction slipped for just an instant before she recovered her composure with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years manipulating social situations. "Darling, you look absolutely perfect, like something from a magazine cover. I was just overseeing some last-minute cleaning. There was a small accident with the glassware. Nothing more than routine household management." Craig's gaze swept the scene, methodically. Linda's pregnant form pressed against marble, her hands bleeding from glass cuts that stained the white shards red. Her dignity stripped away in front of 200 wedding guests who watched like spectators at a gladiator match. The positioning was all wrong, the power dynamic obscene, the casual cruelty so obvious that even the most oblivious observer could see what was really happening. An accident that requires a pregnant woman to crawl on the floor picking up glass with her bare hands while you stand over her like some medieval overseer. Undu. "Well, accidents happen in busy households," Marion said, with a light laugh, designed to minimize the situation, her voice carrying the dismissive tone she used for inconvenient truths. "Staff must take responsibility for their duties, regardless of their personal situations. Standards must be maintained, especially on such an important day." Craig moved toward Linda with purposeful strides that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ballroom's social order, and Marion quickly stepped into his path, like a general blocking a retreat, her white silk robe billowing around her like war banners designed to claim territory. "Craig, don't concern yourself with domestic matters on our wedding day. This is exactly the kind of tedious household management that you won't need to worry about once we're married. I'll handle all staff issues, personally." But Craig was already moving past her with the inexorable force of someone who had finally found his moral compass, kneeling beside Linda on the marble floor without regard for his tuxedo that cost more than Linda's annual salary. The expensive fabric pressed against the cold stone without hesitation. Designer wool, accepting the same indignity that had been forced on an innocent woman. "Linda, look at me." She lifted her tear-stained face, and Craig saw something that made his heart break entirely. Not just pain, but complete defeat, the surrender of someone who had been systematically broken by people with power, who chose to use it for cruelty rather than protection. "Give me your hands, Mr. Atkinson. I'm fine. Give me your hands." His voice carried gentle authority that brooked no argument. Linda extended her trembling palms, and Craig began removing glass fragments with infinite care, treating each cut like a sacred wound that required reverent attention. His movements were gentle beyond measure, his focus complete, as if nothing in the world mattered more than healing the damage that had been done to this woman who, hate, carried his child. This is highly levinous, inappropriate, Craig. Marion's voice, carried a warning edge that had controlled lesser men throughout her life. Our guests are watching this display. People are taking photographs. Good. Let them watch every moment. Craig helped Linda to her feet with infinite care, his hand supporting her elbow, his other hand protective against her back as she swayed slightly from exhaustion and the stress of pregnancy. She moved like someone who had been through a war, every gesture speaking of trauma that would take time to heal. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" he asked, quietly, his voice carrying the tenderness of someone speaking to the most precious thing in his world. Linda shook her head, unable to speak past the lump of gratitude and love that threatened to choke her. His kindness, after such cruelty, felt like water in a deep desert, like hope in the midst of despair. Craig turned back to Marion, and the transformation in his demeanor was terrifying to witness. The gentle man who had tenderly cared for Linda's wounds disappeared, replaced by someone Linda had never seen before, a man whose inherited power was finally being wielded for justice rather than oppression. Marion. His voice carried the authority of generations of Atkinson power, channeled for the first time towards something righteous. "Clean up this glass." Marion's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide her shock at being addressed like a servant in front of the most important people in her social sphere. "Excuse me, I think the champagne has affected your hearing." "You heard me perfectly. Get on your knees and clean up every piece of this glass by hand thoroughly, just as you demanded from Linda." "I will absolutely not." Marion's voice pitched higher, losing the controlled modulation that had been trained into her since childhood. "I'm wearing a $12,000 Valentino robe, and in 30 minutes, I'm walking down that aisle to become your wife." "This suggestion is absurd." "No, you're not." The words fell into the ballroom like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through every guest present. Photographers raised their cameras instinctively. Society reporters leaned forward with the hungry anticipation of people witnessing history being made, and the whispers became a roar that filled the cavernous space. "Craig, you're being ridiculous and emotional." "Am I? You just forced a pregnant woman to crawl on marble floors picking up glass while you stood there enjoying her humiliation, like some sadistic entertainment in front of 200 witnesses on what was supposed to be our wedding day." Marion's mask finally cracked, completely, revealing the ugly entitlement beneath her beautiful facade. "She's staff, Craig. She works for us. If she can't perform her duties properly without making a scene, perhaps she shouldn't be working here at all. Her duties don't include being degraded for your entertainment, and pregnancy isn't the grounds for abuse in any civilized society. It's called maintaining standards, something you clearly don't understand despite your breeding." Craig stepped closer to Marion, his presence suddenly intimidating, despite their long history of assumed intimacy. "You want to talk about standards? Let me tell you about mine. I don't marry women who find pleasure in cruelty. I don't bind my life to someone who thinks a person's worth is determined by their bank account or their job title. You're making a scene that will be remembered for decades." Marion hissed, "Bah, bah," her perfect composure cracking under the weight of public humiliation. "You made the scene when you decided to torture a pregnant woman in front of half of Cunby society." Craig's voice carried throughout the Denny ballroom now, ensuring every guest heard clearly. "You wanted to clean glass? Then you can demonstrate the proper technique yourself." "I refuse." "Absolutely. Then this wedding is over." The silence that followed was deafening, 200 influential people holding their breath as Marion stared at Craig in complete shock. She had orchestrated Linda's humiliation to establish her dominance, to show everyone her power over the household staff, and by extension over Craig himself. Instead, she had revealed her true character to the man she intended to marry, and discovered that character was unacceptable to him. You can't call off our wedding over a servant's hurt feelings. Watch me. Craig turned to address the room full of guests with the demanding presence that came from generations of leadership finally used for something worthy of the family name. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the confusion, but there will be no wedding today. The engagement between Marion Chef and myself is terminated, immediately and permanently. Marion's face went white, then flushed, red with rage and humiliation, as she realized her carefully planned future was crumbling in front of everyone who pride mattered in her world. You don't mean that your mother will disown you? Your family's business relationships will be destroyed. Everything we planned together and was planned without consulting my heart or my conscience, your heart. Marion laughed bitterly. The sound like breaking glass in winter wind. Don't tell me this is about her. She pointed at Linda with undisguised venom, her fingers shaking with rage. Some pregnant maid who spread her legs for money and now has her claws in you. Stop. Craig's voice cut like a blade, sharp enough to silence the entire ballroom. Don't say another word about Linda. But Marion was beyond reason now. Her carefully constructed social mask shattered beyond repair by the public. Destruction of everything she had worked to achieve. This is about her, isn't it? The little I got herself knocked up, and now she has you thinking with something other than your brain. Security, Craig called loudly, his voice echoing off marble walls and crystal chandeliers. Please escort Miss Sheffy from the premises immediately. 2 security guards materialized as if from thin air, moving toward Marion with the professional efficiency of men who had dealt with similar situations before. The wealthy Craig was learning were no different from anyone else. When their masks slipped completely, you'll regret this decision for the rest of your life. Marion screamed as they approached her, her voice carrying a hysteria that shocked guests who had known her for years. My family will destroy you. You'll lose everything. Everything. I already lost everything the moment I agreed to marry you. Indeed, as the guards escorted a shrieking Marion from the ballroom, her threats and curses echoing through hallways that had witnessed generations of Atkinson family drama. Craig turned back to Linda, who stood in the midst of scattered glass and shattered dreams, looking like she might collapse from the emotional whiplash of the last few minutes. Are you all right? Linda stared at him in complete shock, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. What have you done? What I should have done months ago. Around them, guests buzzed with excitement and gossip that would fuel society conversations for decades. The social event of the season had just become the scandal of the century, and every person present knew they had witnessed something that would be discussed in drawing rooms and country clubs for generations. Photographers snapped pictures, frantically, capturing images that would appear in society pages across the Apensi continent, while reporters scribbled notes about the most dramatic wedding, cancellation in recent memory, the story, and would be told and retold, growing in the prevalent telling until it became legend. Susan Atkinson appeared at the ballroom entrance like a storm front, given human form, her face a mask of controlled fury, as she surveyed the chaos that had once been her perfectly orchestrated social coup. Her appearance commanded attention. Despite the dramatic events that had preceded it, her presence still powerful, enough to silence conversations and draw every eye in the room. Linda watched Susan approach and felt a chill of terror run down her spine like ice water in her veins. She had witnessed Susan's cold fury before, but never in circumstances this public, never with stakes this high, never with stakes this much humiliation to avenge. Craig, she whispered urgently, her voice carrying fear that cut through his protective instincts like a knife. Your mother. Craig followed her gaze and saw Susan moving toward them with the inexorable force of justice delayed but not denied. her anger palpable even from across the crowded ballroom. "Let me handle her." But Linda knew better than anyone what Susan Atkinson was capable of when her plans were destroyed so publicly, so thoroughly, so completely. The battle was just beginning, and this time there would be no mercy for anyone who stood in Susan's way. Chapter 7. The Truth Unveiled. Hell hath no fury like a socialite, matriarch whose carefully orchestrated plans have been destroyed in front of everyone who matters in her world. Susan Atkinson moved through the chaos of the disrupted wedding reception like a queen surveying a battlefield littered with her fallen ambitions. Her steel, grey eyes swept over the scattered guests, the abandoned champagne glasses, the whispered conversations that would fuel society gossip for months to come. But her focus remained laser-sharp on one target: Linda Gly, the pregnant maid who had somehow managed to destroy everything Susan had built. The ballroom was emptying rapidly as guests departed, their appetite for drama satisfied, but their social calendars now requiring immediate revision. The Atkinson Sheffy wedding had been the social event of the cracked of the Soch season until it became the scandal of the decade. Craig stood protectively near Linda, wielding questions from confused relatives and concerned family friends. His tuxedo was wrinkled from kneeling on marble, his perfect wedding day appearance ruined, but his attention remained focused on Linda's welfare. "I need to get her out of here," he told his cousin Robert. "She's exhausted and hurt." "Craig, you need to speak with your mother. She's been standing by the window for 10 minutes, and she looks like she's planning someone's execution." Linda heard the exchange and felt ice water replace the blood in her veins. She had witnessed Susan's cold fury once, before in that opulent study where her life had been forever changed. This time, he would be worse because the stakes were higher and the humiliation more public. "I should go to my room," Linda said, quietly. "You're not going anywhere." "Alone," Craig replied. "Not after what you've been through today, Mr. Atkinson. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. Someone has been threatening you, forcing you to lie, making you afraid, and I'm going to find out who and why." Before Linda could respond, Susan's voice cut through the remaining chatter like a blade through silk. "Craig, I need to speak with you, privately now." Mother and son faced each other across the ballroom, their resemblance evident in their stubborn jaws and determined stares. But where Craig's eyes held warmth and concern, Susan's were arctic, with calculated rage. "Not now, Mother. Linda needs medical attention. Linda needs to remember her place." The words dropped into the space between them like poison. Craig's expression hardened as he stepped closer to Susan. "What did you just say?" "You heard me perfectly. This servant has caused enough chaos for one day. She needs to be reminded of her responsibilities and her station." Linda felt the baby kick frantically as if responding to her elevated stress. She pressed both hands to her belly, trying to calm the child while preparing for Susan's inevitable attack. "My responsibilities are to my family," Linda said quietly but clearly, "not to your social ambitions." Susan's laugh was like winter wind through bare branches. "Your family? You mean the family whose survival depends entirely on your employment here? The mother whose medical treatment I personally ensure is funded? The brother whose college education I subsidize? The grandmother whose mortgage payments I guarantee?" Each word hit Linda like a physical blow, but they also revealed something crucial. Susan was admitting to her manipulations in front of Craig. "Mother, what are you talking about?" Craig's voice carried confusion and growing suspicion. Susan seemed not to care that she was exposing her machinations. Her fury overwhelmed her, to her usual careful discretion. "I'm talking about cleaning up the mess you've created by canceling your wedding over some pregnant servant girl who doesn't know her place." "Susan, please," Linda whispered, knowing what was coming. "Please." "What?" "Please don't tell him how you've been lying about your pregnancy. Please don't explain how you denied it. Was his child to protect your family's security? The words exploded across the ballroom like bombs. Craig froze completely, his face draining of color as the implications hit him. What did you just say? Susan realized too late that her anger had revealed too much, but she was beyond caring now. Her perfect world was crumbling, and she faintly wanted someone to pay. I said, "This little gold digger has been lying to you for months. She's carrying your child, but she's been pretending it belongs to some imaginary boyfriend because I made it clear what would happen to her family if she told the truth." Linda felt the prison of this world spinning around her. Her deepest secret, the lie that had torn her heart apart daily, was now exposed in the soul, cruelest possible way. "Is that true?" Craig's voice was barely above a whisper. "Linda is the baby. Mine?" Linda looked at his face, seeing hope and heartbreak and desperate need for truth. Then she looked at Susan, seeing the cold promise of destruction that still held her family hostage. "Answer him," Susan commanded. "Tell him how you've been manipulating him with your silence. Tell him how you chose money over honesty." "I chose survival," Linda replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "I chose my mother's life over my own happiness. I chose my brother's future over my own heart." Craig stepped closer, his hands reaching toward her, but stopping just short of contact. "Linda, please just tell me the truth. Is this baby mine?" Linda closed her eyes, feeling the weight of months of lies and secrets crushing down on her. When she opened them again, tears were flowing freely. "Yes," she whispered, "the baby is yours, Craig. I've been lying because your mother threatened to destroy my family if I told you the truth." The admission hung in the air like a bridge between them, fragile but finally honest. Craig turned to face Susan, his expression transforming into something Linda had never seen before. Not anger, but something deeper and more dangerous. "You threatened her family. I protected our family's future by terrorizing a pregnant woman, by forcing her to lie about my own child, by preventing you from throwing away everything we've built for some ridiculous romantic fantasy." Craig moved towards Susan with deliberate steps, his voice deadly quiet. "You made the woman carrying my child afraid to tell me I was going to be a father. You forced her to endure pregnancy alone, to face judgment and speculation, to protect everyone except herself. I did what was necessary. You did what was monstrous." Susan's mask of control finally cracked. "Everything I've done has been for you, for this family, for our legacy. Our legacy." Greg's voice rose now, carrying throughout the ballroom. "Our legacy is built on cruelty and manipulation, on terrorizing innocent people to maintain social position. It's built on strength, on making difficult choices, on putting family obligations before personal desires. It's built on lies." Craig turned away from Susan and walked back to Linda, his movements careful and purposeful. When he reached her, he gently took her hands in his. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry. You've been carrying this alone. I'm sorry you were afraid to tell me. I'm sorry. My family put you in an impossible position." Linda's tears came faster now, but they were tears of relief as much as pain. "I wanted to tell you so many times. Every time you asked, every time. You looked at me like you knew. I wanted to tell you everything, but you couldn't because of her threats. I couldn't risk my family's safety. My mother needs that treatment to live. My brother deserves his education. My grandmother needs her home." Craig pulled Linda closer, his arms encircling her, carefully, protectively. "They'll have all of that and more, but not because of her threats. Because it's the right thing to do." From across the ballroom, Susan watched her son embrace the maid and knew she had lost everything she had fought to preserve. But Susan Atkinson had not survived decades of high society warfare by accepting defeat gracefully. The war was far from over, Chapter 8. Choosing Love Over Fortune. True wealth. Greg Atkinson was about to learn. Cannot be measured in bank accounts or stock portfolios, but in the courage to stand for what matters most when everything else hangs in the balance. The Atkinson mansion had never felt more like a battlefield than it did that evening. What should have been a wedding celebration had become a family war zone, with Linda caught in the crossfire between generations of power and privilege. Craig sat beside Linda in the library, where their love story had begun months earlier, his hand gently resting on her rounded belly where his child grew. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. They had come full circle, but everything had changed. "How far along are you?" Craig asked softly, his voice full of wonder as he felt the baby move beneath his palm. 6½ months, Linda replied, covering his hand with hers. "It's a boy, a son." Craig's eyes filled with tears. "We're having a son." "You're having a son. I don't know what happens to me now that the truth is out." Before Craig could respond, the DUSP library doors burst open with the force of Susan's rage. She stood in the doorway like an avenging angel, her perfect appearance finally showing cracks after the day's disasters. "Enough of this romantic nonsense, Susan," it declared, striding into the room with military precision. "We need to discuss the realities of your situation, Craig. The only reality I care about is that I'm going to be a father, and the mother of my child has been terrorized into silence for months." Susan's laugh was bitter. "Your child? How do you even know it's yours?" "This. A girl admits she's been lying for months. What else might she be lying about?" Linda flinched as if struck, but Craig's arm tightened around her protectively. "Don't," he warned his mother. "Don't you dare question her integrity. After what you've put her through." "I've put her through. I've protected this family's interests while you've been playing house with the help." Craig stood slowly, his movement deliberate and threatening. "That's the last time you'll speak about Linda that way in my presence." Susan studied her son's face, recognizing something new there. A strength she had never seen before, a resolve that couldn't be manipulated or controlled. "You think you love her," Susan said, changing tactics. "You think this feeling you have is worth throwing away everything your family has built? I know. I love her. And yes, she's worth everything. Really? Let's test that theory." Susan moved to the window, gazing out at the vast estate that stretched beyond the mansion. "You have a choice to make, Craig. Choose this girl and her bastard child, or choose your family legacy." "What are you saying?" Susan turned back to face them, her expression carved from ice. "I'm saying that if you pursue this relationship, if you claim this child, if you make any attempt to legitimize this situation, you will be disinherited completely." The words fell into the library like stones into deep water, creating ripples that would change everything. "Mother, I'm not finished." Susan's voice grew harder. "You will lose access to the family fortune. Your trust funds will be revoked. Your position in family businesses will be terminated. Your name will be removed from all legal documents, wills, and corporate structures." Linda felt the blood drain from her face. "Craig, no, don't listen to her." But Susan was relentless. "Furthermore, every business relationship this family has cultivated over generations will be severed from you personally. Our political connections, our social standing, our influence, none of it will be available to you." "You would destroy your own son?" Craig asked, quietly. "I would save him from destroying himself." Susan moved closer, her voice taking on the persuasive tone she had used to manipulate politicians and business leaders for decades. "Think about what you're giving up, Greg. $50 million in immediate inheritance, control of companies worth hundreds of millions more, social position that opens every door in the world, political influence that shapes policy and law." She gestured toward Linda dismissively. "For what? A pretty face and a moment of ever physical attraction. You can have her as a mistress if you must, but don't throw away your birthright for someone who isn't even from our world. Craig's jaw tightened. She's not from your world. Thank God. This is temporary. Insanity brought on by guilt and misplaced responsibility. In a year, you'll realize what a mistake this was, but by then it will be too late to undo. Linda struggled to stand, Craig helping her carefully. Mrs. Susan is right. Craig, I'm not worth losing everything. Don't say that. It's true. Look at what I am, what I come from. I clean houses for a living. My family lives paycheck to paycheck. I don't belong in your world, and you don't belong in mine. Susan smiled with satisfaction. Finally, someone shows sense. But Craig turned to Linda with eyes blazing. You're right. You don't belong in my world. My world is cold, calculating, built on cruelty and manipulation. You belong in a better world, a real world, and I want to belong there with you. Craig, be practical. I am being practical. His voice rose with passion. What good is money if it comes from terrorizing innocent people? What value does social position have if it requires crushing anyone who threatens it? What kind of legacy am I inheriting if it's built on lies and fear? Susan's composure finally cracked completely. You're being ridiculous. This is emotion, not logic. This is clarity. Craig turned back to Linda, taking her face in his hands. I don't want my mother's world. I don't want inherited wealth built on other people's pain. I want to build something real with you, something honest. With what? You'll have nothing. I'll have everything that matters. Susan played her final card. And what about her family? You think your noble sacrifice will protect them? Without family resources, how will you pay for her mother's treatment? How will you support her brother's education? How will you prevent her grandmother from losing her home? The questions hit their mark. Linda's face crumpled as she realized the impossible position Craig was being put in. She's right, Linda whispered. If you lose everything to be with me, you can't help my family. And without that help, we'll find another way. There is no other way. My mother needs treatment that costs thousands every month. My brother's almost finished with college. My grandmother's too old to start over. Somewhere else. Susan seized the moment. Choose wisely, Craig. You can maintain your inheritance and discreetly support her family while pursuing an appropriate marriage, or you can lose everything and watch her family suffer because of your selfishness. Craig looked between the two women. He cared about most his mother, who had shaped his entire life, and Linda, who had shown him what life could truly mean. I choose Linda. The words came without hesitation, clear and final. Susan's face went white. You don't mean that. I choose love over money. I choose truth over manipulation. I choose building something real over inheriting something corrupt. Craig's voice grew, stronger with each word. I choose Linda and our son over everything else in the world. You'll regret this decision for the rest of your life. Craig pulled Linda closer, his hand protective on her belly where their child grew. The only thing I regret is waiting so long to make it. Chapter 9. Marion's vengeful revelation. Revenge, when driven by wounded pride and shattered dreams, often becomes the weapon that destroys the wielder more completely than their intended target. The following morning dawned grey and somber, as if nature herself mourned the upheaval in the Atkinson household. Craig had spent the night in a guest room, refusing to leave Linda alone. After the previous day's revelations, while Susan had barricaded herself in her study, making phone calls to lawyers and financial advisors, Linda sat in the morning room, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. The baby moved restlessly inside, her responding to her anxiety. Everything felt surreal. After months of hiding, the truth was finally exposed. But at what cost? Craig entered carrying a newspaper, his face grim but determined. The society pages are calling it the scandal of the decade. I'm sorry, Linda whispered. I never wanted any of this attention. Don't apologize for other people's cruelty. Craig sat beside her, carefully avoiding putting pressure on her still tender knees from the previous day's ordeal. I have something to tell you. Linda looked up, seeing something resolute in his expression that both thrilled and terrified her. I've made arrangements to transfer what liquid assets I have access to into secure accounts before Mother can freeze them. It's not much compared to the family fortune, but it's enough to ensure your family's security, regardless of what happens next. Craig, you don't have to. I want to do more than that. He took her hands in his voice growing stronger. Linda, I know the circumstances aren't ideal, and I know you've been through hell because of my family, but I love you. I love our son. I want to marry you. Linda's breath caught. After everything they'd endured, the simple words felt like a miracle. But your mother will learn to accept it, or remain estranged from her son and grandchild. The choice is hers. Before Linda could respond, commotion erupted in the front hallway. Voices raised in argument, Susan's sharp commands, and another voice Linda recognized with a chill of dread. Marion Sheffer had returned. The morning room doors burst open with theatrical force. Marion stood in the doorway like a fury unleashed, her perfect blonde hair disheveled, her designer clothes wrinkled from what had clearly been a sleepless night. But her eyes burned with the fire of someone whose entire world had been publicly destroyed. How dare you, Marion spat, striding into the room with deadly purpose. How dare you humiliate me in front of everyone we know? Craig stood protectively in front of Linda. Marion, you need to leave now. Leave after you destroyed my reputation, my family, standing, my entire future. I don't think so. Susan appeared behind Marion, her face haggarded, but her posture still regal. I didn't invite her in, but perhaps she has something useful to say. Marion's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. Oh, I have plenty to say, starting with the truth about your precious little maid and her bastard child. Don't, Craig warned, his voice dangerous. But Marion was beyond reason, consumed by the need to inflict pain, equal to what she had suffered. You want to know the truth about Street Linda? Here? The truth about how innocent and wrong she is? Linda felt ice forming in her stomach. Marion, please. I knew. The words exploded from Marion like bullets. I knew she was pregnant with your child from the very beginning. The room fell deadly silent. Greg's face went white with shock while Linda stared at Marion in horror. What did you just say? Craig's voice was barely a whisper. Marion's smile was triumphant and vicious. I said I knew she was carrying your bastard. From the moment your mother told me about the pregnancy test, we planned this whole charade together. Susan's face went ashen. Marion, shut your mouth. Why should I? My reputation is already destroyed. But at least everyone will know the truth. Marion turned to address Linda directly. You think you're so noble, suffering in silence to protect your family. You were just a pawn in a much larger game. Craig stepped closer to Marion, his expression murderous. Explain now. Marion seemed to feed on his anger, her voice growing stronger and more vindictive. Your dear mother discovered the pregnancy months ago and came to my family with a proposition. Help her control the Preventi situation and the Atkinson-Sheffer marriage would proceed as planned with significant financial advantages. That's not, Susan began, but Marion cut her off. She told me everything about threatening the girl's family, about forcing her to lie, about keeping you in the dark while planning our wedding. And I agreed because I wanted to be Mrs. Craig Atkinson more than I cared about some servants' feelings. Linda felt the baby kick frantically as her stress level skyrocketed. You knew all along that I was protecting my family. Of Course, I knew. Why do you think I enjoyed humiliating you so much? You think I actually cared about those stupid flowers or broken glasses? I wanted to put you in your place because I knew you were carrying the heir to the Atkinson fortune while I was stuck marrying his father. The admission hung in the air like poison. Marion had participated in Linda's torture with full knowledge of the circumstances, finding pleasure in the suffering of an innocent woman. Craig's voice was deadly quiet when he spoke. You knew she was pregnant with my child, knew she was being threatened into silence, and you still forced her to crawl on the floor, picking up glass. I wanted her to know. Her place. Servants don't get to bear the heirs of great families. They don't get to steal what belongs to their betters. You're insane, Craig said, flatly. I'm practical. This girl would have ruined everything we've built. Your mother understood that even if you don't. Susan finally found her voice. Marion, you're destroying yourself. Stop talking. But Marion was beyond salvation. Now, her need for revenge overriding all. Self-preservation. Why should I protect you now? You promised me Craig would marry me regardless of the servants' situation. You promised the pregnancy would be handled discreetly. Instead, you let your son destroy everything. She whirled to face Linda again. And you, playing the noble martyr, making everyone feel sorry for poor little pregnant Linda. You have no idea what you've destroyed. Generations of careful planning, social positioning, financial arrangements, all ruined because you couldn't keep your legs closed. Craig moved so fast that Linda barely saw it happen. One moment, Marion was spewing venom. The next, she was pressed against the wall with Craig's hand flat against her chest, his face inches from hers. Don't you ever, he said with frightening calm, speak about the mother of my child that way again. Marion's bravado finally cracked as she realized she had gone too far. Craig, I didn't mean, yes you did. You meant every word, just like you meant to torture her yesterday while knowing she was innocent of everything, except loving someone she thought she couldn't have. Craig released Marion and stepped back, his disgust visible. You're a monster. Both of you are monsters. He turned to Linda, his voice gentle again. Are you all right? Linda nodded, though she was trembling from the revelations. I can't believe they knew everything, and it still participated in cruelty for their own gain. Craig helped her to her feet, but it's over now. Everyone knows the truth. Marion straightened her clothes, with shaking hands. You think this changes anything? You'll still lose your inheritance? You'll still be cut off from everything you've known. And for what? Huh? Craig looked at Linda, seeing strength and grace and love despite everything she had endured. Then he looked at Marion and Susan, seeing ugliness disguised by wealth and breeding. Yes, for her, for us, for our son, for the chance to build something real instead of inheriting something corrupt. He took Linda's hand and led her toward the door, leaving Marion and Susan standing in the wreckage of their schemes. Where are we going? Linda asked. To plan our wedding, the real one this time. Chapter 10. Marriage, Birth, and Redemption. Love's greatest triumph often lies not in its beginning, but in its capacity to survive the deepest wounds and emerge stronger than before. 3 weeks later, in a small chapel decorated with simple white roses, Linda Glur became Linda Atkinson in the most beautiful ceremony she had ever imagined. She wore a flowing ivory dress that accommodated her 8-month pregnancy, her eyes bright with tears of joy as Craig slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. I promise to love and protect you and our children for the rest of my life, Craig whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I promise to build a life is worthy of the love you've given me. I promise to trust in that love, Linda replied, and to never let fear steal our happiness again. The small gathering of friends and Linda's family erupted in joyous celebration. Her mother, looking stronger after months of successful treatment, wept openly. Her brother, Marcus, home from college for the wedding, beamed with pride. Her grandmother clutched her rosary and whispered prayers of thanksgiving. Susan Atkinson was notably absent, having followed through on her threats to disown her son completely. But Craig felt no sadness as he kissed his new wife, only freedom from a legacy built on cruelty. 2 months later, in the modest but comfortable home Craig had purchased with his remaining funds, Linda gave birth to their son. Greg held the baby boy with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face as he looked into eyes that were unmistakably his own. "What should we name him?" Linda asked, exhausted but radiant. "James," Craig said without hesitation. "James Atkinson, after your father." For 3 years, they lived in a happiness neither had dared dream possible. Greg started his own investment firm, building it slowly but honestly. Linda devoted herself to raising James while pursuing the nursing degree she had always wanted. Their love deepened with each passing season, rooted in truth and nurtured by shared struggles overcome. But success, Linda would learn, could be its own temptation. Craig's business flourished beyond their wildest expectations. Clients appreciated his integrity, something rare in high finance. Within 3 years, he had earned back a fraction of what he had lost, though it felt like wealth beyond measure compared to their modest beginnings. With success came new social circles, new pressures, new opportunities, and with those opportunities came Veronica Sterling, a sophisticated investor who specialized in helping new firms expand internationally. "Craig's brilliant," Veronica told Linda at a business dinner, her smile perfect and her intentions hidden. "You're so lucky to have a husband with such vision." Linda smiled back, unaware she was looking at the woman who would shatter her world. The affair began innocently enough. Late business meetings, travel to potential new markets, phone calls that lasted hours. Craig told himself he was building their future, but he was really escaping the weight of the responsibility he had never expected to feel so heavily. Veronica was everything Linda wasn't: sophisticated, worldly, unencumbered by children or domestic concerns. She made Craig feel like the powerful businessman that he had been before choosing love over inheritance. "You deserve more than this small life," Veronica whispered during their 3rd month of secret meetings. "You were born for greatness, not changing diapers and discussing preschools." The lies came easier than Craig had expected. Business trips that weren't quite business, meetings that ran later than necessary, a growing distance from Linda that he justified as the natural evolution of marriage. Linda noticed, of course, the way Craig's eyes avoided hers, the phone calls he took in private, the cologne that wasn't his usual scent. But she told herself she was imagining things, that success was simply changing their dynamic, until the night she found the hotel receipt in his coat pocket. The confrontation was quiet, devastating in its civility. Linda sat at their propped kitchen table, the evidence spread before her, waiting for Craig to come home from another business meeting. "How long?" she asked, when he walked through the door. Craig looked at the receipts, the credit card statements, the photographs Linda had hired a private investigator to take, and felt his carefully constructed lies crumble into dust. "Linda, I can explain." "How long?" "Craig, 6 months." The words fell between them like stones into deep water. Linda nodded slowly, her heart breaking, but her voice steady. "I want you to leave." "Linda, please." "It's over. I ended it tonight." "She means nothing." "She meant enough for you to lie to me every day for 6 months. She meant enough for you to betray everything we built together." Craig sank into a chair, finally, understanding what he had done. I was stupid. I was weak. Success went to my head and I forgot what really mattered. What really mattered was our family, our son, our vows. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Craig. Sorry doesn't erase 6 months of lies. Linda stood carefully, her dignity intact, even as her world collapsed. I won't keep James from you. You're his father, and he needs you in his life. But I can't be your wife anymore. Linda, don't do this. We can work through this. We've survived worse, have we? Because this feels like the worst thing that ever happened to me. Craig moved toward her, but Linda held up a hand to stop him. I need you to leave tonight. We'll figure out the rest later, but I need you gone. 3 months later, Craig stood outside the small house where Linda and James now lived, rain soaking through his expensive suit as he stared at the warm light glowing in the windows. Inside, he could see Linda reading to their son the picture of peace he had, thrown away for momentary excitement. He raised his hand to knock, then let it fall. What right did he have to disturb their happiness? He had made his choice, and now he lived with the consequences, but the weight of losing them was unbearable. Every business success felt hollow without Linda to share it. Every milestone James reached happened without Craig there to witness it. He had gained the world and lost his soul. Finally, as the rain turned his tears invisible, Craig sank to his knees on the front steps of the home that should have been his. His sobs came from a place deeper than shame, deeper than regret. They came from the recognition that he had possessed everything that mattered and traded it for nothing. I'm sorry, he whispered to the closed door, knowing Linda couldn't hear, but hoping somehow his words would reach her heart. I'm so sorry for throwing away the greatest love story ever told. Inside, Linda heard the sound of someone crying and moved to the window. When she saw Craig and on his knees in the rain, her own tears began to fall. Love, she realized, was the most powerful force in the world, powerful enough to forgive even the deepest betrayal. But some doors, once closed, required more than tears to open. Again, the greatest love story was far from over.